Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm here with Jamie Spencer. It's Natalie here, as you know, only one United. We're just gonna basically have a chat with Jamie and see how he's doing. How are you, Jamie?
I'm good. It's nice to be here. It's a chance to speak about United, so happy.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hi Ellie. Hi Vix. How's everyone? I'll let you guys just chat in the corner and listen. If you were watching via Twitter, come over to YouTube, get in the comments. We're just going to be talking about everything. Jamie, I suppose, before we go any further, I want to hear about you, about how you got into football, and then I suppose how you got into Man United women football.
Yeah. So, football for me started, and I don't want to give away my age, but 25, 26 years ago, just as watching Premier League matches when I was a kid. So, got into football writing probably about 8-9 years ago, just built up from there, a lot of Premier League, Man United men, and then women's football from around the time of the 2015 World Cup. I had an opportunity to maybe do a few bits and pieces, results, kind of roundups, that kind of thing. And then with 90min.com, that went a lot bigger, 2019 World Cup. And then more recently, I've been doing a lot of their women's content, building it up. And then they've started with a full-time women's editor. So that's Ali Rampling. Some may know her or not already. And then what that has allowed is that she focuses on the women's content as a whole, with the league and the other clubs. And what we've kind of identified is that there's a big market for United that no one's really filling, and that's sort of where I'm trying to focus on now is covering United and making sure that every game has coverage, because one of the major issues that women's football has is that resources are still quite stretched. So if you've got 1 or 2 writers per publication, then they're going to have to pick and choose what clubs and where they're basing themselves at any given weekend. So, United games can fall through the cracks, and my aim now is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, I'm telling you, as fans, we're hungry. I see Vic saying there, definitely a market for United content, and I suppose how did it come about? Because, as fans, we always feel like we're the biggest fans, we need the most. But how did it sort of come about that it was Man United? I mean, I know you're a fan, Jamie. Did that have a pull or? Yeah. What was it?
Being a fan in the first place was important. So I've been going to games, just buying tickets as a fan for since around 2019, the first WSL season. And then just because I had a platform and the opportunity to write, doing bits of news here and there, but maybe not as frequently as would be liked. And because I know you guys, I know that how passionate you are. I know there's a market there, because it's United. Whatever United do, men, women, academy, boys, girls, there's always going to be a pull because of the name. So there's obviously something there, and the numbers that I've seen on social media already, just in the last, I think it's only been about 2 weeks since I basically made that sort of that big post and said, this is what I'm going to do now. So we've been buoyed in that as well. I think I'm lucky that because I'm working alongside a full-time women's editor, I still do other stuff as well. I'm still going to do Premier League, I'm still going to do men's football, but I'm going to make sure that there's United content out there filling gaps that isn't already there. And I've said this to a few people. I don't know if you guys are probably familiar with Tim Stillman at Arsenal.
Yes.
And that kind of work he does. So if I can replicate the kind of thing that he does for Arsenal with United, then that'll be a massive success.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone watched the last sort of video. Definitely go and check it out. We had Molly Hudson on, and that's something that she talked about having a Tim Stillman for every kind of club. It'd be great. And then if sort of you're going to be our new kind of Tim Stillman, it'd be great.
I'll try.
Yeah, because I think with Tim, this is what was said about. We said to Molly, because we go and watch every game, and now that's going to be you, Jamie, and obviously you know how the fans feel, what the fans want, by watching, that say Jackie is this kind of thing, and this is how they feel, and this is what they want to see. So you can ask those questions maybe in the press conferences that the other ones don't pick up on. I mean, have you found that with Mark, that is sort of, well, you said he noticed your haircut, but do you find that you're picking up on questions, maybe follow-up questions if he's not touched on something, or what, or not? Is it too
I would
early?
say so. As a loose example, I've spoken to you on DMs before press conferences and got your thoughts on the kind of things that you want to hear. As an example, from a few weeks ago, somebody asked about team news before, I think it might have been the Reading match, and he mentioned a few players, but he didn't mention Jade Moore. And at that point, she hadn't made a debut, and it was sort of a bit up in the air of what stage she was at. So I did come back around later on and asked him that. And one thing I will say about Mark is, like, I've not got a vast amount of experience with managers and press conferences, but he's a really easy person to talk to in that sense. He's not particularly guarded. He's very open. He's very honest. He's clearly very passionate, but he's also very personable and quite friendly as well. So you don't feel like you can't ask him things.
No, definitely. And then just pulling this up again, because Vicky's saying the clarity and injuries was a big one. United are very secretive. And I know that I don't know if it's just United or just generally every club. I think if an injury happens, you don't really hear about it. I mean, Aoife did her ACL, and then it was sort of, we only sort of posted, and it was 3 weeks in, and we think it potentially did happen at Chelsea, and obviously because that's the last game we saw her, but then that's going back a month nearly, you could say.
It happened at Chelsea. I think he said that last week. She played on at the time as well, so I don't know at what point in the game, but yeah, it was Chelsea when it happened.
Okay. See, that's, I suppose, the insight that you get from having a women's journalist. I mean, like you said, you touched on the numbers are doing good, and I can really see the numbers going up. I mean, what do you think? I think now, I suppose, Jamie, it's coming around to the transfers and the contracts that everyone wants to know about. So, I mean, you did the interviews with Mary and Ella recently. Is that something that you think with United? Because I've heard from other journalists, they say it's hard, it's difficult, but is that something, I suppose, player interviews you want to do more of?
I mean, yeah, that would be a really good thing. So those two interviews were put on by Remington, who are obviously a chief sponsor of the club, and that was to promote before the Old Trafford game. But the club also put on interviews with press at the same time. So there was, I think, a lot of the players were based at Old Trafford that day. I know that you were hanging around outside as well, and you saw Mary, and I think I saw you from across the concourse, but I'm not the kind of person that would run over and start shouting, like, hey. So so I was inside Old Trafford that day. A lot of the player interviews were conducted over Zoom as well. So, like, it depends on the strategy of the club in terms of, if they want to grow an exposure, then there's a clear path there that if they, do put up players for interview, then that is a way to make the players more known. To refer to something that Mark said after the game on Sunday, that's sort of the ticket. The more they show the players, the more they show how good they are, the more they show their personality. And I think that last bit is quite important. The more people are going to sort of latch onto it, because I know that you guys, you go every week, you know them pretty well, but that isn't necessarily the case for everyone. So they need to see, what kind of people they are. And so, ideally being able to speak to them, probably not every week, but like maybe once a month, try and get an interview or something and see where we go from there. Like, for me personally, I'm still quite new in this early stages of this, so it's just about seeing what's possible really, and then taking it from there, and especially like in the summer and into next season, and seeing where we are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just want to, I suppose, now touch on on Old Trafford and the game, but the build-up and the aftermath, and sort of, I think I've spoken on other channels and just spoken to other people. For us fans, that build-up, like you're saying, there was just content. It was flowing. That week was amazing, and then obviously you talk about that day when you went down and I went down, and I had been down the day before because I did hear about the posters that were being put up all around, and the day before they actually blew down, so they said come back tomorrow and they'll be up. So obviously I came after work to get my photos, and people were obviously still, this is the thing that people say, oh, it's women's football, no one cares. No, there was still and you were there, fair amount of people that come and was taking pictures outside Old Trafford, was taking pictures of Honor, of Tooney, of, let's say, maybe they didn't know them, but they were still taking pictures because it was Old Trafford.
Yeah.
It's Man United, and that's what I do find people will love Man United, whether it's the girls, boys, or I think you just have to, like you say, put them out there and teach them about these players, and they'll fall in love just the same. So obviously, when the whole build up, how did you feel? Obviously, you knew you were doing your interview, but just seeing the content going up, the men's team tweeting, the women's team tweeting, the level of content was a level that we've probably never felt from Man United before. So, what do you think of that?
I think it was good because was it about a week before the game? There was probably about one post a day on the main account, and then that seemed to get ramped up and up and up as the days progressed and got nearer to the game. So right near the end, they had quite a bit of content. They had that Mary interview with David De Gea and other bits and pieces like that. And I just say like the outside of the stadium, and there was people around just on a weekday, because Old Trafford is going to be a place that's going to attract people regardless. So even if they went not knowing, about the game that was coming up a few days later, they would have seen the branding, they would have seen the posters, and it might have twigged a bit of intrigue. If Old Trafford's going to get tourists all the time, and they might not have been around for the game, but they might have gone home taking something away with them in that sense. And I would just say, yeah, I think the fact that it was the international break for the men's obviously helped, because you've not got the usual content that you would expect on that side of it. But yeah, so again, like just it's quite a simple message in the sense of people need to know about something before they can be interested in it, and that's the biggest and easiest way to do that is just to publicize it, really. And I've said this before on other shows, I've written it down in pieces. You need to make people aware, and if they're aware of it and it's available, then they will come to it. And I think that's the real core message. That's been reflected in the viewing figures for the last World Cup, for the WSL matches this season that have fallen during men's international breaks on TV. The Champions League stuff on YouTube, when they released last week, there was 14 million views across the group stage. So if it's there, people will take an interest, and if it's not, they won't, because and again, I've said this before, the vast majority of football fans, and probably the vast majority of sports fans, are casual fans. They're always going to be core groups like yourself that will hunt it out and watch it regardless of where it is, what time it is, whenever it is. But a lot of people are casual fans, so if you don't make it clear and available and accessible to them, they're not necessarily going to go out of their way to find it. And I think if you've got it on BBC, if you've got it on Sky, if you've got branding on the stadium, if you've got good marketing campaigns, and all of these things are getting better, that is how you're going to get people to take an interest, because it doesn't take a lot. And then again, just to refer back to something that Mark said on Sunday, the more that people see the players, the more they will take an interest. And it is quite a simple message. Obviously, there's going to be competition at some point. The men's football will come back, but you've got to give people the opportunity and then take it from there.
I think definitely about the whole what you're saying about just the marketing and putting it out there in the face, and like you say, people are going to come to Old Trafford no matter what. And I think as someone who lives in Manchester, who's around Man United all the time, you do sort of take that for granted. I'm not a person who You know, even though I live 10 minutes from Old Trafford, 20 minutes, I wouldn't go there on a day-to-day. But if I'm someone who's coming for a week or been in London and I come up to Manchester, the first place that you are going to see is Old Trafford. And I had a friend who's travelled from Israel to watch the game, and he's going to be there next on Sunday as well. And he's watched a few games. He's watched the England game. He's watched a Salford game. You know, he's done a whole 10 days kind of thing in England. And he went for the tour of Old Trafford, and he said that week they had, you know, the dressing room in Man United, the names of all the players, and on the tour they were talking to them. They were talking, you know, I know in the museum the championship trophy is in the centre of the room. There's pictures of Casey and now Mark in it, and you know, on the tour they were saying who's coming, you should get your tickets. You know, this is the women's team, and talking about how the women's team was reformed in 2018 and the players and Casey and Mark. So, like you say, those things are important. You know, it's just about continuing that kind of thing and hopefully seeing more people turn up, and that's what is important. And I'm going to just touch on something at the end, but, you know, I've seen that they're doing more promotion for Sunday kind of thing, and trying to get people to, you know, if you've come to Old Trafford, come to LSV, and those kind of things are important, I suppose. Jamie, what do you think?
Here it is, because obviously if there was 20,000 people there on Sunday, not everybody's going to come. Not everyone's going to come straight back. You know, some people will have just been there for the fact it is Old Trafford and you could get in for £6 as opposed to, you know, £60. But if they went and they enjoyed it, then they've got every reason to keep up the interest, you know. And even if to begin with, perhaps it's just, you know, following the team online a bit more, just taking a bit more of a general interest, because maybe they weren't even aware that it was a team before. You know, I know that, you know, we're very aware, we know what the deal is, but, you know, some people might not have been particularly aware of the fact that the team exists at all. So yeah, just trying to, because if there was 20,000 people, around 18,000 of those people, let's say, wouldn't normally go to a match at Lee. If you get 5% of those, that's maybe another 1,000 on top of your usual numbers, and that's like a significant boost when you're talking about 2,000-3,000 in the first place. You know, if they could start filling both stands at Lee on a more regular basis, and then see from there, really. And I've seen lots of comments this week about the suitability of Lee as a long-term venue in relation to that. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts, like how you typically get there. I know that people have commented a lot because it's not particularly accessible if you don't have a car. I always drive there. I find it relatively easy. I don't live particularly close to Manchester anymore. I live just a bit further into Cheshire, but I live quite near the M6. So you get on the M6, you get straight up there quite quickly. So for me, it's actually accessible. But granted, if you didn't have a car, public transport links to Lee are not especially good.
Well, yeah, on a Sunday as well, they are even worse because it's Sunday service. The bus comes every hour. I have taken the bus before. It was all right. Just get you there. It takes about half an hour plus. But, I mean, I sort of live city centre-ish. But what I do, I meet people. So I have a friend. I'm happy even for other people. I meet them at Victoria. We drive. We're there in 10 minutes, you know, out of city centre, up the East Lancs, and we're there kind of thing. So it is quick if you have a car, and I think that's the thing. And Vicky's, well, Cheryl's saying it's easy if you drive. The lack of transport is a factor, and I think a lot of people potentially that were there probably don't drive because you could just get on a tram, and that's how most people get to Old Trafford. And, you know, even younger people, even if, you know, your dad doesn't want to take your mum, you still, you know, teenagers, they can just get on a tram and go to Old Trafford. And it's that kind of atmosphere in women's football where it's not, no one's really worried about anyone. It's just sort of you all go in and you sit. And I mean, Ellie's saying here, if you don't have a car, bus service is 15 minutes from the bus stop to Lee. So it does need to be improved. And I think things like maybe I know they have done it in the first season. They did a free bus met in town at the Crown Plaza, and it wasn't full, but it was like 20 to 30 people were on it, and it was well received. I know they tried to pick it up and carry on doing it, but I think the next game was in the evening and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I think maybe this next game is like the perfect time, or maybe the start of next season is like the perfect time to start it all again. These are all things that, I mean, Vicky's saying here, Abington Station isn't too far away from the bus station. But as well, I agree with what you're saying. I come away from really short. I'm lucky my husband drives, but Cheryl's saying it is a brilliant stadium. It's nice. Yeah. There's greenery around it. There's, it's very welcoming. I've always been welcomed by the stewards, the people. You can get food and drink. There's a pub next door. It's all, there's a the Morrison, so you can get other food
on a match day.
Yeah, so it is kind of, it has that feel of a village, because you've got everything there, and it's sort of, it's a great experience when it is match day at Lee, and I'd lovely for it to stay, but I do think that they are looking into a mini stadium. That's something that's been pushed a lot more, and I'm hearing it a lot more, and I do think eventually it'll happen. But I just want to touch on something. Your points, though, definitely on a mini stadium, but also what Ellie's saying there about the ticketing. They're doing a buy one, get one free. What do you think about that in general, Jamie? And then just your opinion on what we just talked about.
I think buy one, get one free, it's incentivizing it, isn't it, really? I know there's been criticism from people in the past about free tickets or about giveaways, because if people have got a free ticket, they may be less inclined or less motivated to actually use it at the time, if the weather's bad or if they just don't fancy it on the day. People have said that about the cheap prices as well, because it's about £6, £3 for kids and that. One thing I would say to argue against that would be, and I mentioned it earlier, if you're looking at taking yourself, maybe a couple of your kids or whatever to Old Trafford for a men's match, you're looking at maybe £50-60 for yourself, £30 for the kid. There's two kids, over £100 just for tickets, and there's no guarantee that you'll even get them because it's that oversubscribed. If you're looking at the women's game, instead of £100, it's going to be £10 for you and a couple of kids. It's just so different, and ultimately you're still watching football, you're still watching Man United. It's not, you're going to get a friendlier atmosphere if you're a bit concerned about taking your kids out into crowds of 70,000-80,000 people, for safety purposes or for whatever. It's just a lot more friendly in general. So incentivizing people to have tickets is always going to be a starting point. So I perfectly agree with that it's a good idea for not every time, but for this time especially. I think, has it been targeted to people who specifically bought tickets?
Been before, yeah. So I think the people who came to Old Trafford, I'm not saying that it should just be for them, but I think if you came to Old Trafford, you get it, which is
the people who were there on Sunday saw what they saw, and that's going to be an incentive to want to come back, especially in the context of the game as well, actually going a goal behind and then having the comeback on, and the fact that it was the players who scored as well. It was homegrown players or fans of the club in that way, and you could see the celebrations from what it meant to them, and then you get all that posted online afterwards. I've seen a lot of clips today of like different angles of the goals and the celebrations, and that's always going to engage people more. As I say, definitely. Keep coming back to this point of getting back to getting people to know the players, and that's really a huge part of it.
I suppose I just want to touch on this point from Cheryl now with you. I know you talked about, and we talked about it off air before my computer broke, but like the atmosphere was great, and that's what I was worried about. And Cheryl, I don't know if you're the person I spoke to before earlier today, but if you haven't been before, that is a normal Man United women atmosphere, and you might not get that at other stadia. It's maybe not the same, but I just feel that. I mean, I don't know what you felt because you were in a different part to us, but where we were, it sounded loud. And then I've had people say some sections were good, some sections, I don't know, but I've had pretty much everyone sort of said they could always hear the songs throughout. They could always hear that. So what did you think of the atmosphere then?
Yeah, so I was in the press box, which is in the south stand. You guys were in that corner opposite.
Yeah.
I could hear you quite clearly singing your songs. I could see you, all stood up. I will say there was a group of Everton fans just to the right of us in the press box, and they made it. They had their own songs as well. That made it a bit more of an atmosphere. Obviously, you had some decent numbers, in all four stands. But what I said to you privately before was that I was surprised by the noise when the equaliser was scored, because I couldn't see the other people in the south, so I didn't realise perhaps how full it was. So that, as I said, when that goal went in, the noise actually surprised me, and then that was replicated for each one thereafter. In the press room afterwards, I think it was Molly actually. I overheard her say to someone that she thought there was more people than was announced. So I don't think they announced it in the stadium during the match, but somebody gave us a number afterwards, so it was 20,241, I think. And then the others remarked that actually they thought there was more based on the noise because of how loud it was. And say normally, it's you and your crew leading the chants at Lee, but you were complimented this time by a couple of tens of thousands.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people are saying I was in the Stretford end, it was buzzing. The Stretford end does look buzzing, and what I will say is, it sounded louder when we scored that end. I don't know if you felt that, Jamie, but I just think
it just felt all around me. To be honest, it shook me a little bit. I wasn't expecting it.
Definitely the third goal, that was the real, when I thought, whoa, that was the real pop. I say, when I hear it, that was the real power moment for me, that third goal. I mean, they all were, but even just listening into them back, the third one just, it gives me a bit of goosebumps. And Vicky saying here, love to see more people singing at LSV. And I know they've got like a little thing. I know people struggle to buy in the section with us, and I don't know if that's because of COVID, and they have that black lining, and the girls are sitting there. And I know that when probably next year now they'll remove that, and those seats can fill up, and they can definitely sell some more seats in the side where we all stand and sing more so. But I know for Brighton, the two west are sold out now. They're selling the south, so hopefully when that happens, it's over to. But I mean, I want to see. I don't know what you think, Jamie, about 3.5, 4, maybe on Sunday. What do you think would be a good number for Sunday?
I would say pushing 4 would be good. I was looking at some of the figures around a weekend that prior to that match, I think the best attendance for the season had been something like 3,800, and that was for one of the derbies. But apart from that, I think everything had been below 2.5. So I think maybe pushing towards 4, getting that like off riding the wave basically of last week, and see how it goes for the rest of the season. I think next season will be interesting because you'll have the spike of the tournament interest, and that's always going to bring a lot more people. Because when I first started going, just buying tickets as a fan to Lee, it was start of 2019-20, so off the back of the World Cup, and there was visibly a lot of interest at that point, because the first game I actually went to was the Etihad away when there was 31,000, but then I went to the Arsenal and the Liverpool games successively after that, and they both had, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they were both higher than they've had this season. And obviously the circumstances in the world have taken a toll on that. People are not as willing to go out, and it has had an unfortunate effect because obviously the whole season got cancelled at that point as well. So it wasn't even around for a solid 6 months. So yeah, if they could get 4,000, I think that would be a win, and then just build it from there. Ultimately, if they could fill the three stands at Lee with where all the seats are, and do it regularly. Just to bring it back to the point you were saying before about the stadium and the suitability of Lee, it would concern me that if you started to get crowds of, say, 3,000, 4,000, the car parking would be full. You would struggle, because if I remember correctly, I've been to games before where attendance has been around the 3,000 mark, and it was already pushing full at that point. So if you were to get double that number of people, perhaps, as a target, I think the car parking situation would be an issue, unless they could, take on more car parking somewhere else and do some kind of park and ride if there's other facilities nearby.
Yeah. Well, I do know they use the hotel as an overfill, and I know behind the stadium they can use, but there's going to be, obviously, I suppose I just want to touch on this then, because what you're saying, there's going to be a game with Holland. Yeah. And I think, well, we know that Russia aren't going to play, so they're saying it could be Poland, but, there's going to be 3 group games and then a quarter-final at Lee. And I think that quarter-final could have, like, Holland or maybe a different team, but it's Italy could be in it, France could be in it. So, we're trying to build up this interest for women's football as a whole. And obviously, the Euros is here. They're going to push that. So it is going to be, I suppose, interesting. How do you think they're going to cope with the Euros, Lee? Just from your take of being there. And
I think the group matches, if I'm not mistaken, might be during the daytime in midweek. So obviously you're not going to get as many people go into those, but I can't remember the exact schedule. If there's a weekend game, then, there's obviously more chance for people to get out there. But if there's people in the local community and they can advertise it locally, if you live in Leigh, it's probably not a million miles away to walk. There's a housing estate right by the stadium, so I wouldn't expect massive attendances at those games unless there were, say, traveling fans, because obviously the Dutch will bring a lot of fans. That's kind of one of their big reputations, especially being reigning champions as well. It's benefiting that there's popular teams there, because obviously Sweden as well. All I would say about Lee, as I've noticed some comments before saying that Lee as a stadium is absolutely, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very good by WSL standards. That's something that Mark said last week when he was asked about playing games at Old Trafford more regularly or indeed permanently at some point in the future. He made the point that Lee is actually a very good facility that they enjoy playing at. When I spoke to Ella Toon last week, she said similar, that, Old Trafford's great, but also we love playing at Lee because it's our home. That's how they feel about it.
I will say I love Lee as well, because I wouldn't want to play at Old Trafford regulated, and like how Birmingham have done and Leicester have done and Reading. That's not something I would want, because even though 20,000 it was great and it would probably seem louder, I don't think you would get a 20,000 every game. You might even get even more when it's City and Arsenal and Chelsea. But for me, Lee, I think I like being close to the pitch. At Old Trafford, you can't be close to the pitch. I'm not saying that they didn't hear us, because they said they heard us from minute one. That you saying you heard us at thing, but I just think when the times gets tougher, even, look at that City game, the way that City just, even I know Cheryl was talking about the derby in the league when it was 2-2, and I think Lee helped that. I think being close to the pitch helped that. So I think for me, you might not have got that 2-2 if it was at Old Trafford. I just think we need a women's football, 75,000 would be great. And I know Mark did talk about, one day we'll fill it out. But for me, I think a big game like City, or, unless we got close to 50,000, a game that matters, like City, like Arsenal, like Chelsea, a Champions League game, I wouldn't want it at Old Trafford unless we were like, like how Barcelona is now, where you can, really have an impact. You know, they've announced it. I mean, I know people were saying, oh, it looked a bit empty. It might have been 70k, but then they've announced, no, it's 91k. So, you know, that's basically their capacity kind of thing. So for me, unless it's, you know, again, like City, I'd want minimum 50,000 there just for the impact that it can have, you know, because I do find that in women's football, I think in men's football as well does, but in women's football, fans can really play a part in terms of, you know, sucking the ball into the net, driving your team on. I know that they mention it a lot, don't they, Jamie? But I just think with the way it is at Lee, and I mean, you mentioned some of those earlier games, you know, when we played Liverpool, I know that had an impact, you know, the fans that day. So I wouldn't want to lose Lee just like that to then go and play at Old Trafford every week. That might not be, you know, 20,000, even less. You know, it wouldn't be beneficial for the team, I don't think.
No, I think United are very invested in Lee as well, because obviously they base the under 23 men's there as well. To come on a point, if you were to ditch Lee, I don't think they'd move to Old Trafford. The other thing then is there a suitable stadium elsewhere? And I'm not sure that exists at this moment in time. I know one of the other grounds that the club has close links to is Altrincham, and I've seen you post at Altrincham a few times, but Altrincham is not of anything close to that standard. It's really small. You know, there's only one stand that hold maybe 200 people, and the rest of it's quite, you know, one row terraces. I used to live in Altrincham, so I used to go to games a fair bit at one point. From an access point, yeah, fine, but the actual stadium itself is nothing like the standards of Lee or that the club would want to be using. You know, it's fine for it. They play the under 21 games there, and you know, and that's fine because they're going to have obviously a lot smaller crowds, and you know, it's still a good facility in a good place. But for that level, Altrincham is not the one. And then you've got to look at other places, and on a purely speculative basis, the only other stadium that I could think of in any, you know, vague right territory would be Stockport, but you know, then that gets quite complicated quite quickly, you know. So for now, I think that Leeds is what it is. Like, its location is not ideal, but actually it's pretty good for what it needs to be.
Yeah.
Your other alternative then is looking at you mentioned before, like a mini stadium, you know, like the one they've got at City or the one that they have at Barcelona or Real Madrid. Yeah. I don't know if United have got the land available to them to build that somewhere near Old Trafford, but if they did, and it was around 10,000, that would be probably the ideal long-term solution, but is whether that's feasible.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to the Talk of the Delos podcast, and Andy Mitten was talking about the options that are available, and obviously one of the ones that was floated would be to knock that down and build a new stadium, and then sort of maybe turn Old Trafford into like the mini stadium or something like that, so you wouldn't lose that patch of grass, but you'd, you know, build the new stadium where the car park is kind of behind, and then have that patch of grass maybe as the mini stadium or something like that, you know. Which, I mean, I remember I've been on the show and I said, you know, I wouldn't be totally against, and some people might think that I'm being traitorish saying this, but I'm not totally against knocking down Old Trafford. Not to knock it down and lose all your history and do that. No, but I think in terms of when you look at Old Trafford, when you go to it, as someone who's been regularly, it isn't, you know, I do look and think, how are you going to make it, you know, up to date and up to speed? And I do love Old Trafford and I'll always love it, but if you properly go in there when it's a full packed and there's no room by the seats, there's no leg, you know, and you look at somewhere like Spurs, it is that kind of thing, and that is the way football is going. In a way, it's very modern Spurs compared to us. It's very old. The concourses, some of them are not like up to speed. Some of them are great. Some of them in the Fergie stand are great, but then some of them in the Stretford end probably are a bit too small for them. What it is, it's
the roof leaks, you know, as well.
The roof. There's a lot of things to be done, but I mean, what Andy Mitten said is that there's still enough that Man United can have a mini stadium. These are ideas that have been floated for long, but there's enough that Man United could build a mini stadium, could challenge in the Champions League, and then could, in terms of signing players for both men and women, so it's not thingy, they can do both at the same time. But these are the promises that they made from after the Super League. They promised to invest into training, they promised to invest, and I do know they have started that kind of work, so that's something that's ongoing. But like, they promised to invest in the stadium, and obviously they're floating these ideas, but these aren't new ideas. They've been talking about building on top of the railway for a long time. So Andy Mitten sort of said, stop talking. That's what we want to say. I'm getting a lot of hate here now, Jamie. I'd be heartbroken. Imagine if we get though. I mean, for me, I still think they could build the women's stadium where that parking is, behind the Trinity statue. They could bring it up, I think eventually that will be the plan. I think eventually they will do that. In a couple of years, I can see them having that.
Yeah, because you've seen the success that it obviously has at places like the Etihad campus, where they've got the main stadium and the academy stadium right next to it, where I don't know how close in proximity they are, but obviously Barcelona have got a small stadium and Real Madrid have got a small stadium. And, if you had a 10,000 stadium and were able to fill it, that would be a huge look. It's not that many people in the grand scheme of things compared to men's football, but it wouldn't take a lot. And especially if you market it right and it's in the right place, then there's no reason why it wouldn't get filled.
Definitely. I think, even the City and the Derby, I think probably that helped them, push them along the line, having that stadium, because it was full, and it wasn't in the grand scheme. If they then put it in the Etihad, it would have been nothing really. But then if you put it in a stadium purpose built, it has the fans have their impact, kind of thing. Jamie, I suppose we've been talking a lot about Old Trafford and the impact, but what do you think of the game in general? And I suppose now United, we talk about mini cup finals. So that was our fifth. There's 4 more left.
Yeah.
Alessia said it. What's your thoughts now going into the weekend of the game and just of Man United's season, I suppose, so far, and what we can achieve?
I think obviously it is going to come down to a game-by-game basis. I think Mark has been very clear in his press conferences that that's how they're approaching things. It's one game at a time, 1 week at a time. The ultimate goal is obviously top 3 in Champions League football, but that's not what they're looking at right now. Right now is what they're looking at is playing Brighton, is playing, West Ham. Is it still to come again? And just taking it 1 week at a time. Obviously, that is that big one at the end against Chelsea, but there's no point thinking about that if you don't win the ones beforehand, because the assumption is that City would take maximum points. I don't know whether them having a game postponed at the last minute the other day would have had a disruptive impact. Maybe. I imagine that it wouldn't, because they're all professionals. The only hope from a United perspective is that City drop points, and they've got West Ham and they've got Reading, and both those teams could throw a spanner in the works, but at the same time, you wouldn't trust it. So I think it's just about focusing on each one at a time. United are obviously in good form. The West Ham game was a bit of a disappointment in the way it finished, but they'd actually played all right in that match, and they blew away Leicester at the start of March, and they were decent against Reading in what was quite an intense end-to-end game overall. So they've just got to do what's in front of them. I would hesitate to say that Champions League is going to happen, but I wouldn't absolutely rule it out. And the players are confident. They know that they can beat the teams in front of them. And then if they get to Chelsea on the last day and it's just a win and you're in kind of situation, like literally a one-off cup final, then maybe it happens. The other side of this that people maybe haven't discussed as much is if Chelsea have won the league before then and they don't need points that day, and maybe, I don't know if they'd be going, I don't know when the FA Cup final is, but, thrown out there as an example, if they have won the league before then and they rest players and, it gives United an opening. So, yeah, I think just, one game at a time is how they've is how they've got to do it. But I would be confident of at least the next 3 matches of taking maximum points, and then it's just all on that final one, really.
Definitely, everyone's saying 1 game at a time. That's the sort of consensus I've got from the comments that I've just been putting up as you've been speaking. But Lanzel's just asked the question. I hope you don't mind us just saying this. Have you heard anything about United moving beyond the season, such as transfers, etc.? And I suppose, do you think Champions League will have a big impact on where, I suppose transfers, like he says, and even contracts, or do you think people will stay no matter what or what?
I would say that Champions League is more likely to impact new signings rather than contract renewals. The renewals that may not happen would more likely be the ones that are fringe players at the moment, the ones who have been around for a few years but lost their places. I would say that those are more likely to move on than, say, a Jackie, who would be considered an important first-team player. I know that recruitment has been discussed. Mark has said on a couple of different occasions, I think. So he said either before or after a recent match that in relation to the depth, because obviously they've had issues at the back again since January, they need to recruit better to avoid that happening in the future, ultimately.
Vicky's saying, "Hey, we need defenders."
Yeah, he's mentioned that they are looking ahead to summer already. The issue of a new head of women's football has been brought up, and last week, but it was Emma Sanders who asked him directly about that. He said that the conversations are happening, and they're just looking for the right person. So maybe by summer, that will be a good time for that to be in place to get a proper structure in. If you go back to last year, he was only appointed, was it late July, more or less? So United were without a manager for around 2 months at the end of last season, which probably did impact recruitment, because it's always going to be harder recruiting players to a particular project if there's no clear project to join. United will have an impact because of the badge, because players will have grown up fans, regardless, even if just of the men's team, and they want to play for the same club as players that they've watched. So Mark has also been quite adamant that he's still, coming to terms with this squad, and they're still learning his ways. It's been about 8 months since he's been in the job. That's not a very long time, and he's a manager that's got a reputation for being very particular in his style of play and wanting players to adapt to his ideas, and he doesn't much like changing his ideas. That's not to say his ideas are rigid, because actually his ideas, he's very into sort of the fluidity of positional change and that kind of tactical system. But players still need time to learn that, and you've probably seen that more, particularly with the forwards since January. You've had that front three of Galton, Russo and Thomas as a three, and then Elatoon behind as a number 10, and that four as a group has worked really well. And I think that has probably been the result of repetition and practice in training for months now. So, and he's very clear as well about character and attitude, recruiting the right people, and not just maybe the best player that's available doesn't fit in. So there's that to it as well. So I think this summer will be an important one. As I said, I don't think Champions League football will affect the contracts too much this year. It might do next year if they still haven't quite got over the line. I would say it's more likely to have an impact with potential new signings, that if you are in the Champions League, the club is suddenly a lot more attractive to more players. That's not to say that, they should only want to join the club if it's in the Champions League, but it's always going to be a factor. So, Champions League important, maybe not the be all and end all. It's not an absolute catastrophe if it doesn't happen this season, because the squad and the team will be stronger for it next season, especially 1 year into this project and with a full summer to properly prepare for last season, because everything was this season, everything was a bit rushed in the summer with the Olympics, with no manager for a good while, with probably a very short pre-season, and the fact that they're actually in this position at the moment is credit to them, because if I'm totally honest, I thought that United might fall away a little bit this season. I know that a lot of people were talking about Everton in the summer, and it obviously has not gone right for them at all. I thought United might drop away to 5th, if I'm being totally honest, and I'm glad to be proven wrong by reality, but that is what I thought. So they've in my eyes, they've possibly overachieved at this point.
Never doubt, Jamie. Yeah, never be a doubter. But I'm seeing a lot of questions. I am going to touch on a few questions, and I suppose what you said about the forward 4 and the midfield and everyone that's playing, and I know that you brought it up, Jamie, to him, rotation. That, I think, is something that I do hear. Not like it's a criticism, but it's just I know that fans want to see it more. This player, Brun, do you think she'll stay? And then we talked about Russo, and I think Russo stepped it up since Brun has come in.
Yeah.
I think she's done. I think it's not like, because I was saying, definitely when Brun, and we were all, looking for that 9, saying is Russo an outside forward, Russo. But since she's gone in the middle,
and
then Brun's been injured a bit, she has really, locked it down. And I think because she knows Cena's on her shoulder now, I think she's managed to lock it down even more. And I definitely like Brun. I mean, I think she'll stay anyway, Vicky, so you don't have to answer that question. But, rotation, I want to see more of Vilda. I want to see more of Ivana. I want to see, I think that West Ham game, we talk about it, but a lot of them were very, very tired, and I think that's because they played so much. And I think they are getting used to his style, like you said. And I think they're having to build up their fitness. Like you said, he only came in late, so that sort of, we've not had a great pre-season. That can affect in the long run, Do you think... what? Because I know he said to you about it, but what do you think when you do say to Mark? Because I've said it to him as well, and I do think he gets a bit frustrated when you mention rotation, because he says, "I love all my players," and I'm like, "Well, play them then."
No, that's what he's very quick to defend his squad. When I specifically asked him about that the other week, his response was that first and foremost, every single player in the squad currently has his trust. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't be in at the club, and he's very adamant about that. I just think that the rotation thing, it probably does come down to a lack of depth. I don't know. Maybe not everybody's fully fit, and I know there's been was it the bench for the West Ham game was quite short. There wasn't that many players on it. If everybody's not fully fit, then he might feel a bit more under pressure to not force them and risk worsening any problems or that kind of thing. So it comes back to depth, really, and it's what he said himself about recruiting better, planning better for those eventualities, so that you don't get into the same problems again, next season, because United have had burnout issues, not just under him, in the past as well. It's possibly maybe the squad is just that fraction too small, and the next few months are going to be quite important as addressing that and making sure that if you lose, one centre back, it's not suddenly you've got to reshuffle and put a midfielder in there. If you lose a player, have a like replacement that is available to come in. You look at the squads that Chelsea have got, that Arsenal have got, that City have got. That's the longer term ambition. As you said before about Brun, her coming in has kicked Russo into another gear, and that is probably exactly what was intended. Maybe he would have hoped for Brun to be able to play. I know she's had some fitness issues more recently. He would have hoped that she could have played more, but her being at the club has clearly had a positive impact, even if it's not through her own minutes on the pitch. So it's just about replicating that, perhaps in more areas.
Definitely. And you talk about depth, and I know this is something as well. A lot of people talk about. A lot of people mention to me, but this question: can you see some of the academy stepping up either at the end of this season or next season? Because I know, I mean, I watched them a lot. I know Mark went to watch them today. Unfortunately, dropped points against Leicester, but I know that Martha Harris played, Carrie Jones played, and Jade Moore played some minutes. Jade Moore scored. Maria Edwards scored. Well, unfortunately, they conceded 3 goals. But development football's like that. But I don't know if you watched the final. I know Mark's talked about it. I know he's called up. What I will say, to be fair to Mark, he has called up a lot more than maybe what we've seen. I would like to see Neve Murphy, who has been called up a lot at fullback, actually given those minutes now. I think she, out of all of them, Rebecca May as well, because Rebecca May has played that first season under Casey before it was called off in the WSL. But I would like to see, I'm not saying like Brighton and West Ham are pushovers, but I just think with it being at home, if we can, like what we did with Leicester, get that cushion, I would like to then see Neve Murphy, maybe someone else. But then I suppose we're talking about Vilda and this and that. So we want to see them as well, but I suppose it's different positions. But I do think Neve is the one that everyone is saying they want to see now. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, so obviously, realistically, it's going to have to be only a few. Not everybody from a youth team, no matter how successful they are, is going to make it either at United or maybe not professional clubs. Like it's sometimes how it is. So, but if they could get 3 or 4 or 5 on the fringe of the first team next season, because that's going to be beneficial to them. I saw that the club put out like an interview with Charlotte Healy on social media. Was it today or yesterday? Discussing her role. She's very in very close contact with the first team. She talks to the overall head of academy. It's kind of like a core philosophy at United that they do develop players, that they want to forge paths from the like the junior sides into the first team. Obviously, there have been 1 or 2 debuts. Kind of Solskjaer played that cup match a couple of months ago. So they're it's clearly on the agenda. Mark has said that that trying to forge that path, trying to make sure that they're ready, and not putting too much pressure on anybody before they can handle it. Just bringing them into training more and more often. Trying to get them up to that level and making sure that the leap isn't as big as it perhaps might be at this moment in time. So I don't think there'll be masses of promotions into the first team, but because you can never say that that's going to happen. Realistically, if they don't make it at United, then the hope is that they make it at other clubs in the WSL or the Championship. There's no reason why they couldn't, but you're not going to get a whole, as much as everybody would want it, you're never going to get a whole homegrown squad going into the first team together. But as many as they can, within the realms of realism, making sure that nobody's under too much pressure, making sure that everybody's comfortable. They can handle what's expected of them. Because the worst thing that you could do in this situation is that you would put a 20-year-old in the first team and something goes wrong and they can't handle it and it breaks them before they've achieved anything. So it's just doing things right by them, really, and just there's no rush either, particularly. Because ultimately you're looking at long term rather than short term as well. So the more the better. Obviously they are very capable players because they've won a trophy at that age group. So yeah, like everybody wants to see homegrown players, and I'm sure that over the next year, 6 months to 2 years, probably, you will see more and more players get an opportunity, and then I suppose it's up to them how much they take them.
Yeah. I'll touch on Lanzel's question just quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. So sorry, guys. What's your thoughts on the goalkeeper situation? Got Fran and Rambo. Would we loan them again, or do you think one might leave essentially?
I mean, it's difficult because obviously a first team place is not really on the cards at the moment. I believe that both Mary and Sophie Bagley have got contracts to 2023 +1. So it's not like either of them are going to be in a position where they're considering their futures anytime soon. Obviously, you would want them playing first team football, as much as possible. So I would expect loans to be more likely, because I know that certainly Emily Ramsey signed a new contract before she left the last time.
Yeah, they both signed 2 years.
Yeah. So clearly the club still has an expectation that, they might come into the picture at some point. So I would definitely say that selling is probably not likely, but loans, it will be probably the most plausible and realistic and the best option for the players as well, because the last thing they want to do is not even get on the bench and just be a training goalkeeper.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, Jamie, I just want to say thank you so much. You're always welcome back, and I've had a good time. I hope you have.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to talk about United, honestly. So
yeah,
I would definitely come back if you'll have me.
No, definitely. And I think people should definitely go and check you out, because like you say, you're doing articles all the time on the women, you're at all the press conferences, so you're one definitely that everyone should follow. Yeah,
thanks. No, your shout outs over the last couple of months have really pushed my numbers as well. So you've been I can't afford to pay you as an agent, but it's appreciated.
No. I think as long as you're just bringing us the good news, and you tell Mark what we're thinking, then that's appreciated. Karen, great show. So everyone, thank you so much, Jamie. See you later, everyone. Thanks, guys. Keep up the good work. See you soon. See you Sunday.